The rain was falling when Robert Harrington stepped out of his black Mercedes at Oak Hill Cemetery. His driver offered an umbrella, but Robert refused it. He wanted to feel the cold drops on his face. He wanted to feel something, anything, besides the emptiness that had consumed him for the past 3 months. His expensive Italian shoes sank into the wet grass as he walked between the rows of graves. He knew the path by heart now. 37 steps from the main road, then left at the old oak tree. He had made this walk 17 times since his daughter's funeral, but today something was different. As he approached the white marble headstone that bore the name Emily Rose Harrington, 1995-2025, he stopped. His heart skipped a beat. Someone was already there. A young woman was kneeling on the wet ground, her shoulders shaking with sobs. She wore a thin jacket that was clearly not enough for this weather. Her dark hair was plastered to her face from the rain, and in her arms, wrapped in a faded blanket, was a child. Robert stood frozen. In his 62 years of life, in his 38 years of building one of the most successful tech companies in America, he had faced countless challenges, but nothing had prepared him for this moment, this stranger. At his daughter's grave, with a baby. "Who are you?" His voice came out harsher than he intended. The young woman jumped, startled. She turned to look at him with wide, frightened eyes. They were red from crying, and her face was pale with cold. She couldn't have been more than 23 or 24 years old. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling the child closer to her chest. "I'll leave. I didn't mean to disturb anyone." She started to get up, but her legs were weak. She stumbled, and Robert instinctively reached out to steady her. His hand touched her arm, and he was shocked by how thin she was, how fragile. "Wait," he said, his voice softer now. "How do you know my daughter?" The young woman looked at him with such pain in her eyes that Robert felt his own heart crack open a little more. She looked down at the headstone, at Emily's name carved in the cold stone, and a fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. "She saved my life," the woman said simply. "Emily saved my life." Those 4 words hung in the air between them, heavier than the rain. Robert Harrington had thought he knew everything about his daughter. He had thought wrong. Let me take you back to understand how we arrived at this moment. Let me tell you about Robert Harrington, a man who had everything the world could offer, but had somehow lost the most precious thing of all. Robert had built Harrington Technologies from nothing. 40 years ago he had started with a simple idea and a loan of $5,000 from his father. Today his company was worth $12 billion. His face had been on the cover of Forbes magazine 5 times. Presidents asked for his advice. World leaders wanted to shake his hand. But success comes with a price. And the price Robert paid was his family. His wife, Margaret, had left him 20 years ago. "You love that company more than you love me," she had said, on her way out the door. Robert had not argued with her. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he did not know how to love anything except his work. But Emily, his daughter, his only child, she had stayed. Even when her mother moved to Paris, even when Robert worked 80 hours a week and missed her birthday parties and school plays, even when he forgot to call on Christmas. Emily stayed. "I understand, Dad," she would say, whenever he canceled their dinner plans for a business meeting. "Your work is important." And Robert had believed that was enough. He had believed that providing for his daughter, the best schools, the finest clothes, a trust fund that would keep her comfortable for life, was the same as loving her. How blind he had been. Emily had grown into a beautiful woman, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's stubborn determination. She had studied medicine at Stanford, graduating at the top of her class. Robert had been so proud. Finally, something they could share. Success, achievement, excellence. But Emily did not follow the path Robert had imagined for her. She did not take a position at a prestigious hospital. She did not specialize in something that would make her famous and wealthy. Instead, she had chosen to work at a free clinic in one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. Why? Robert had demanded when she told him. You could work anywhere in the country. Any hospital would be lucky to have you. And you're choosing to work for free in a dangerous neighborhood? Because they need me, Dad, Emily had replied, her eyes shining with something Robert could not understand. Because every person deserves medical care, not just the ones who can afford it. Robert had called it foolish. He had called it a waste of her talent. He had told her she was throwing her life away. Those were the last words he had ever said to his daughter. 3 weeks later, Emily was driving home from a late shift at the clinic. A drunk driver ran a red light and crashed into her car. She died instantly. And Robert Harrington, the man who had conquered the business world, who had never failed at anything he tried, was left with nothing but regret and a grave to visit. Now, standing in the rain at that same grave, Robert stared at the young woman before him. The baby in her arms made a small sound, and she rocked it gently. "What do you mean she saved your life?" Robert asked. "I don't understand." "How did you know, Emily?" The young woman hesitated. She looked at Robert's expensive coat, his designer shoes, the Mercedes parked at the edge of the cemetery. She seemed to shrink into herself as if she expected him to dismiss her. "My name is Sophia," she said quietly. "Sophia Martinez. I was one of Dr. Emily's patients at the free clinic." "Patients?" Robert repeated. "But you said she saved your life." Sophia took a deep breath. The rain continued to fall around them, but neither of them moved. It was as if the world had stopped, waiting for her story. "I should start at the beginning," Sophia said, "but it's a long story, Mr. Harrington, and it's not a happy one." Robert looked at the young woman, at the baby in her arms, at his daughter's name carved in stone. For the first time in 3 months he felt something besides grief. He felt curious. He felt the first stirrings of hope that perhaps there was still something of Emily left in this world. "I have time," he said. "I have all the time in the world. Please, tell me about my daughter." Sophia's story began 2 years before this rainy day at the cemetery. She had grown up in poverty. Her mother had left when she was 5 years old. Her father had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, but it was never enough. When Sophia was 16, her father was diagnosed with cancer. He died 6 months later, leaving Sophia alone in the world. "I had nothing," Sophia said, her voice trembling with the memory. "No family, no money, no hope. I was living in my car, working whatever jobs I could find, cleaning offices at night, washing dishes at restaurants, anything to survive." Then she met Carlos. "He seemed like a good man at first," Sophia continued, her eyes darkening. "He had a job. He had an apartment. He told me he loved me, and I believed him. I was so desperate for someone to care about me that I ignored all the warning signs." Robert listened in silence. He knew nothing about this kind of life. He had never struggled for anything except business deals. He had never known what it was like to be hungry, or cold, or alone. "When I got pregnant," Sophia said, looking down at the child in her arms, "I thought maybe things would get better. I thought Carlos would be happy. I thought we would become a real family." She paused, and Robert saw the pain on her face. "He was not happy. He told me to get rid of the baby. When I refused, he—" She touched her cheek, where a faint scar ran along her jawbone. "He became a different person. He hurt me, many times. I wanted to leave, but I had nowhere to go. I had no money, no friends, no family, and he told me that if I ever tried to leave, he would find me. He would make me regret it." Robert felt a burning anger rising in his chest. He had never understood how anyone could hurt a woman, especially one who was pregnant with their child. "How did you meet Emily?" he asked gently. Sophia's face changed at the mention of Emily's name. The pain was still there, but now it was mixed with something softer, gratitude, love. "I was 7 months pregnant when Carlos hurt me badly enough that I needed medical attention," Sophia said. "But I couldn't go to a regular hospital. Carlos had told me he knew people there. He said he would find out if I tried to get help. So I found the free clinic instead. It was in a different neighborhood. I thought I would be safe there. She wiped the rain from her face, or maybe it was tears. Robert could not tell any more. Dr. Emily was the one who treated me that night. She was so kind, so gentle. She cleaned my wounds and asked me what had happened. And when I lied, when I told her I had fallen down the stairs, she looked at me with those beautiful eyes and said, "You don't have to tell me the truth right now, but whenever you're ready, I'll be here to listen, and I'll be here to help." Robert felt tears forming in his own eyes. That sounded exactly like Emily. That compassion, that patience, that refusal to give up on anyone. "I went back to Carlos that night," Sophia admitted. "I was too scared to do anything else. But I couldn't forget Dr. Emily's words, and the next time he hurt me, I went back to the clinic." Over the following months, Emily had become more than Sophia's doctor. She had become her friend, her confidant, the only person in the world who knew the truth about Sophia's situation. "She gave me books to read about domestic abuse," Sophia said. "She helped me understand that what was happening to me wasn't my fault, that I deserved better, that my baby deserved better." Robert remembered how Emily had always been bringing home stray animals when she was a child, an injured bird, an abandoned kitten, a lost dog. She could never turn away from anything that was suffering. He had thought it was a weakness. Now he understood it was her greatest strength. "When my baby was born," Sophia continued, her voice breaking, "Dr. Emily was there. She held my hand through the whole thing. And when I held my daughter for the first time, she told me, 'This child is your reason to be brave. This child is your reason to fight for a better life.'" Sophia looked down at the baby. No, the toddler now, Robert realized, about 18 months old, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I named her Emily," Sophia whispered, "after the woman who gave me the courage to survive." Robert felt the world shifting beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about his daughter was being rewritten. All those years of working late, of missing holidays, of assuming that Emily was fine, that she didn't need him. He had missed so much. "What happened after the baby was born?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Sophia hesitated. The rain was beginning to let up, but the clouds remained thick and gray above them. "Dr. Emily helped me make a plan," Sophia said. "She knew I couldn't stay with Carlos. She knew that sooner or later his violence would go too far. So she helped me save money. She found me a job at a small bakery owned by a woman she knew. She arranged for me to stay at a shelter for women escaping abuse." Robert was stunned. His daughter had done all of this? His daughter, who had never mentioned any of it to him? Why hadn't she asked for his help? He could have provided so much: a safe apartment, legal protection, financial security. But even as he thought it, he knew the answer. Emily had known that her father would not understand. She had known that Robert Harrington lived in a different world, a world of business deals and profit margins and success, measured in dollars. He would not have understood a world where a woman had to hide from a man who was supposed to love her. "For 6 months, everything was good," Sophia continued. "I was working at the bakery. I was living at the shelter with my baby. I was saving money and making plans for a real future. And every week, I would go to the clinic just to see Dr. Emily, to thank her, to tell her how things were getting better." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Then Carlos found me." Robert's heart sank. He knew this was coming, but he still was not prepared for it. "He showed up at the bakery one day," Sophia said, her body trembling with the memory. "He was so angry. He said I had humiliated him by leaving. He said I had taken his child from him. He said he was going to make me pay." "What happened?" Robert asked, dreading the answer. "He grabbed my arm and started dragging me toward his car. I was screaming for help, but everyone was too afraid to get involved. And then—" Sophia's face transformed. "And then Dr. Emily appeared. She had been walking to the clinic and heard me screaming. She ran toward us and told Carlos to let me go." Robert could picture it perfectly. His daughter, small but fierce, standing up to this violent man. It was so like her, so reckless, so brave. "Carlos laughed at her," Sophia said bitterly. He told her to mind her own business. He said that I was his woman and his child, and no one was going to take them from him. But Dr. Emily refused to back down. She told him that if he didn't release me immediately, she would call the authorities. She held up her phone and started recording him. That must have made him angry, Robert said quietly. It did, Sophia confirmed. He let go of me and turned toward her instead. For a moment I thought he was going to hurt her, but then something strange happened. Dr. Emily looked at him without fear. She looked at him like he was nothing, like he was just a small, pathetic man with no power at all. Sophia shook her head in wonder. She told him that she knew exactly who he was. She had researched him. She knew about his criminal record, about the warrants in other states, about the other women he had hurt. She told him that if he ever came near me or my baby again, she would make sure that information found its way to the right people. Robert felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. Emily had been so smart, so strategic. She had fought for this woman not with fists, but with information, with power. Did he leave you alone after that? Robert asked. For a while, Sophia said. He disappeared for several months. Dr. Emily helped me get a restraining order. She helped me find a small apartment of my own. She even paid the first few months of rent from her own pocket. She wouldn't let me say no. Robert thought about the calls he had ignored from Emily during that time, the messages asking if they could have dinner together, the invitations to visit her at the clinic. He had always said he was too busy. There was always another meeting, another deal, another crisis that seemed more important. What if he had said yes? What if he had gone to see her? Would she have told him about Sophia? Would he have had a chance to help? Then what happened? Robert asked. Sophia's face crumpled. Then the accident happened. I heard about it on the news. A drunk driver had killed a young doctor. They showed her picture. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't accept it. Dr. Emily was gone. The only person who had ever truly cared about me was gone. She began to cry again, and the child in her arms stirred restlessly. I went to the funeral, Sophia continued through her tears. I stood in the back where no one could see me. I watched you, Mr. Harrington. I watched you standing by her casket looking so lost, and I wanted to come up to you. I wanted to tell you what an amazing person your daughter was. But I was afraid. I was afraid you would think I was crazy. I was afraid you would blame me somehow. I was afraid of so many things. Robert reached out and gently touched Sophia's shoulder. It was the first time he had touched another person with kindness in months. You have nothing to be afraid of, he said softly. Not anymore. The rain had stopped completely now, and weak sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. Robert looked at the young woman before him, at the sleeping child in her arms, and made a decision. Come with me, he said. You're cold and wet. Let me take you somewhere warm. We can talk more. I want to know everything about Emily, everything I missed. Sophia hesitated. Mr. Harrington, I don't want anything from you. I didn't come here looking for charity. I just came to visit Dr. Emily's grave, to thank her, to let her know that little Emily is growing up healthy and happy because of what she did for us. Robert shook his head. This isn't charity. This is... He paused, searching for the right words. This is me trying to understand my daughter. This is me trying to make up for all the years I wasted. Please, let me do this. After a long moment, Sophia nodded. They walked together toward the Mercedes, where Robert's driver was waiting with a look of barely concealed surprise on his face. Take us to the house, Robert instructed, and call ahead to have the kitchen prepare something warm. During the drive, little Emily woke up. She looked at Robert with curious eyes, brown eyes just like her mother's, and reached out one small hand toward him. She likes you, Sophia said with a small smile. She doesn't usually take to strangers so quickly. Robert let the child grip his finger. Her hand was so tiny, so delicate. He thought about all the times he had been too busy to hold his own daughter, all the moments he had missed. How old is she? He asked. 18 months, Sophia replied. She'll be 2 in April. 2 years old. Emily had known this child for almost a year before the accident. She had watched her grow. She had held her. She had loved her. And Robert had known nothing about it. "Tell me more," he said. "Tell me everything you remember about Emily." And Sophia did. She told him about Emily's kindness, how she would stay late at the clinic to see one more patient, how she would personally drive elderly patients home when they had no transportation. She told him about Emily's laughter, how it would fill the small examination rooms and make everyone feel at ease. She told him about Emily's determination, how she had fought with insurance companies and government bureaucracies to get her patients the care they needed. She told him about Emily's loneliness, too, how sometimes, late at night at the clinic, Emily would talk about her childhood, about a father who was always working, about a mother who had chosen a new life in another country, about feeling like she had to prove herself worthy of love, even though she could never seem to succeed. "She missed you," Sophia said quietly. She never said it directly, but I could tell. Every time her phone rang, there was this look of hope on her face, like she was waiting for you to call. And when it wasn't you, that hope would fade, just a little, every time. Robert felt the words like physical blows. He had done that to her. He had made his daughter feel unloved. He had made her wait for a call that never came. "I was such a fool," he whispered. "Such a blind, stupid fool." "You're not the only one who made mistakes," Sophia said gently. "I made plenty of my own. But Dr. Emily taught me something important. She taught me that our past doesn't have to define our future. She taught me that as long as we're still breathing, we have a chance to do better, to be better." They arrived at Robert's house, a massive mansion on a hill overlooking the city. Sophia stared at it with wide eyes, clearly overwhelmed. "Don't be nervous," Robert said, noticing her discomfort. "It's just a house. It's too big for one person, really. I've been thinking about selling it." Inside, the housekeeper had prepared hot tea and sandwiches. Sophia ate hesitantly at first, but her hunger soon overcame her shyness. Robert noticed how thin she was, how her clothes were worn and patched. "Where are you living now?" he asked as she fed small bites of bread to little Emily. Sophia looked down. "We're staying at the shelter again. I lost my job at the bakery 3 months ago. The owner had to close because of financial problems. I've been trying to find work, but..." She glanced at the child. "It's hard to find someone to watch Emily while I work, and most jobs don't pay enough to cover both rent and child care." Robert felt a new emotion rising in his chest. Not grief this time, but purpose. For the first time in months, he felt like there was something he could do, something that mattered. "I have a proposition for you," he said carefully. "I know you said you don't want charity, and I respect that. But what if it wasn't charity? What if it was an exchange?" Sophia looked at him warily. "What kind of exchange?" "My daughter loved you," Robert said. "She saw something in you worth fighting for, and now I want to understand what she saw. I want to know who Emily really was, not the daughter I thought I knew, but the real Emily, the one who stayed late at the clinic, the one who helped women escape danger, the one who named herself godmother to your child." Sophia's eyes widened. "You know about that?" "I guessed," Robert admitted. "It's exactly what she would have done." He leaned forward in his chair. "Here is my proposition. Move into this house. There are more rooms here than I could ever use. Your daughter, your Emily, can grow up in a safe place, with a good education, with everything she needs. In exchange, you tell me about my daughter. You help me understand the woman she became. You help me become the father I should have been, even if it's too late." Sophia opened her mouth to protest, but Robert held up his hand. "This isn't about money or debt. This is about family. My daughter chose you. She chose your child. That means something. That means you're connected to Emily, and through her, to me. I don't want to lose that connection. I've already lost too much." For a long moment Sophia was silent. Little Emily had fallen asleep again, her head resting against her mother's chest. "Can I think about it?" Sophia finally asked. "Of course," Robert replied. "Take all the time you need. But in the meantime, please stay here tonight. It's getting late, and I won't have you walking back to the shelter in the dark with a baby." That night, Robert sat alone in his study, surrounded by the awards and trophies of his business career. None of them meant anything to him now. They were just objects, just things. He thought about what Sophia had told him, about the daughter he had never really known, about the lives she had touched, about the difference she had made in a world that often seemed cold and uncaring. Robert had spent his entire life accumulating wealth and power. He had believed that success was measured in numbers, revenue, profit, market share. He had built an empire, but in the end, what did it matter? Emily had built something different, something that couldn't be measured in dollars. She had built connections. She had built hope. She had built a legacy of kindness that would outlast any building with his name on it. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Sophia, still wearing the old clothes she had arrived in. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much on my mind." Robert gestured to the chair across from him. "Neither could I. Please, sit." Sophia sat, looking around the study with curiosity. Her eyes stopped on a framed photo on the desk, Emily at her graduation from medical school, beaming with joy. "She looks so happy there," Sophia said. "She was," Robert agreed. "It was one of the few times I made it to one of her events. I almost canceled for a meeting, but my assistant convinced me to go." He picked up the photo and looked at it more closely. "I remember what Emily said to me that day. She said, 'I'm going to help people, Dad. I'm going to make a real difference in the world, not with money or power, but with kindness, with compassion. You'll see.'" Robert set the photo down with trembling hands, and I said, "That's nice, sweetheart, but kindness doesn't pay the bills. Can you imagine? My daughter was telling me her dreams, and I dismissed them like they were nothing." Sophia reached out and gently touched his arm. "She forgave you, Mr. Harrington. She talked about you all the time, and there was never any anger in her voice. Just love. Just hope that one day you would understand." "But I didn't understand," Robert said bitterly. "Not until it was too late." "It's not too late," Sophia said softly. "Dr. Emily used to say that. She used to tell me that as long as we're alive, it's never too late to change, to grow, to become the person we were meant to be." Robert looked at this young woman, this stranger who had appeared at his daughter's grave, carrying a child named after the daughter he had lost, and felt something shift inside him. Maybe Emily's story wasn't over after all. Maybe it was just beginning a new chapter. Days turned into weeks. Sophia stayed at the mansion, reluctantly at first, but gradually accepting the comfort and safety it provided. Little Emily began calling Robert Papa, which made him cry the first time he heard it. Robert threw himself into learning about his daughter's life. He visited the free clinic where she had worked and met her colleagues who shared story after story about her dedication and kindness. He met her patients, elderly immigrants, single mothers, homeless veterans, who wept when they talked about the doctor who had treated them with dignity when no one else would. He learned that Emily had been paying for medications out of her own pocket when patients couldn't afford them. He learned that she had personally driven a pregnant teenager to the hospital when she went into labor during a snowstorm. He learned that she had stayed up all night with a dying man, holding his hand so he wouldn't have to face the end alone. With each story, Robert's grief transformed. It was still there. It would always be there, but now it was mixed with pride, with admiration, with a determination to honor his daughter's memory. He called his lawyers and created the Emily Harrington Foundation, dedicated to providing free health care to underserved communities. He donated $50 million to start it, with a promise to donate more every year. He converted part of his company's headquarters into a daycare center so that employees who were parents wouldn't have to choose between their careers and their children. He personally reached out to Sophia's former employer, the woman who had owned the bakery, and offered to help her reopen. When she protested that she couldn't accept charity, he told her the same thing he had told Sophia. "This isn't charity. This is an investment. My daughter believed in you, and that's good enough for me." But not everyone was happy with these changes. Robert's business partners and board members watched with growing concern as their CEO transformed before their eyes. The ruthless, profit-focused executive they had known was becoming someone different, someone softer, someone who cared more about people than about profit margins. "This has got to stop," said Marcus Webb, the chairman of the board, during an emergency meeting. "Robert has lost his mind. He's giving away money left and right. He's creating programs that will hurt our bottom line. If we don't do something, the shareholders will revolt." There were murmurs of agreement around the table. "And what about that woman he's taken in?" added another board member, Victoria Chen. "A former patient of his daughter's, living in his house with her child? It looks bad. People are starting to talk. They're saying she's manipulating him, taking advantage of his grief." The board members nodded gravely. They had all seen the tabloid headlines. "Tech billionaire's mystery woman. Grief-stricken CEO adopts stranger." Someone needs to talk to him, Marcus decided. Someone needs to make him see reason. Robert was in his study when Marcus arrived, unannounced and uninvited. "We need to talk," Marcus said, settling into a chair without being asked. "About your recent decisions, about the direction of the company, about her." "Her?" Robert repeated coolly. "You mean Sophia?" "I mean the woman who appeared out of nowhere and is now living in your house, spending your money and influencing your business decisions." Marcus leaned forward. "Robert, listen to me. I've known you for 30 years. We've built this company together, but you're not thinking clearly. Your grief has made you vulnerable, and people are taking advantage." Robert was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Let me tell you something about my daughter, Marcus. Something I never understood until recently. Emily spent her entire career helping people who had nothing. She worked in a clinic that couldn't afford to pay her what she was worth. She gave away her own money to patients who couldn't afford their medications. And do you know what she got in return?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "She got love," Robert continued. "She got gratitude. She got the knowledge that her life mattered, that she had made a difference. That's something all the money in the world can't buy." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I spent 40 years building this company. I sacrificed my marriage. I sacrificed my relationship with my daughter. I told myself it was worth it, that I was building something that would last. But you know what, Marcus? Buildings crumble, companies fail, stock prices go up and down. None of it lasts." He turned to face his old friend. "But kindness lasts, compassion lasts. The impact we have on other people's lives, that's what remains after we're gone." Emily understood that. "And now, finally, so do I." Marcus stared at him. "So what are you saying? That you don't care about the company anymore?" "I'm saying that the company isn't the most important thing in my life anymore, and it never should have been." The confrontation with Marcus marked a turning point. Over the following weeks, Robert gradually stepped back from day-to-day operations of Harrington Technologies. He promoted younger executives to take over, people who shared his new vision of corporate responsibility. Some board members resigned in protest. Some shareholders sold their stock. The business press wrote articles predicting the downfall of the company, but something unexpected happened instead. Employees who had been thinking about leaving decided to stay. They liked working for a company that cared about more than just profits. Young talent started applying in record numbers, attracted by the company's new reputation, and customers, ordinary people, who had never paid attention to corporate leadership, started choosing Harrington Technologies over competitors because they wanted to support a company with values. Within a year, the stock price was higher than ever. Meanwhile, Sophia's life was transforming as well. With Robert's support, she enrolled in community college to finish the education she had been forced to abandon years ago. She discovered a talent for nursing and decided to follow in Emily's footsteps, planning to work in healthcare. Dr. Emily always said I had a gift for caring for people, Sophia told Robert one evening. I never believed her. I thought she was just being kind. But now I think maybe she was right. Little Emily was thriving too. She was talking in full sentences now, a bright and curious toddler who loved books and singing and playing in the garden of the big house that had become her home. She had her own room, painted pink because that was her favorite color, filled with toys and stuffed animals that she rarely played with because she preferred the cardboard box they came in. Robert had never expected to be a grandfather, or a surrogate grandfather, which was closer to the truth, but he found himself treasuring every moment with this child. He read her bedtime stories. He taught her how to count using the coins in his pocket. He pushed her on the swing set he had installed in the backyard, laughing when she demanded to go higher, higher, higher. "You've changed," Sophia told him one evening, as they sat on the porch watching little Emily chase fireflies in the fading light. "I have," Robert agreed, "though I wish it hadn't taken losing my daughter to make me see what really matters." "She would be proud of you," Sophia said. "She always believed you would understand eventually. She just didn't think she would live to see it." Those words hit Robert hard. His daughter had believed in him even when he didn't deserve it. She had hoped for him even when he gave her no reason to hope. And now he was determined to prove her faith wasn't misplaced. 1 year after that rainy day at the cemetery, Robert organized a memorial service for Emily. But it wasn't the traditional kind of memorial, with solemn music and formal speeches. Instead, it was a celebration of her life, held at the free clinic where she had worked. Hundreds of people came. Former patients arrived by the busload, many of them traveling for hours to be there. Colleagues and friends filled every available space. Even people who had never met Emily came, people who had heard about her through the foundation that bore her name, or through the programs her memory had inspired. Sophia stood at the front of the crowd, holding little Emily in her arms. She was nervous about speaking in public, but Robert had asked her to share her story, and she couldn't refuse. "Doctor, Emily saved my life," she began, her voice trembling, "but not in the way you might think. She didn't perform surgery on me. She didn't cure some rare disease. She did something much harder than that." She took a deep breath. "She saw me when I was invisible. She believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. She showed me that I mattered, that my life had value, that my future was worth fighting for." She looked at Robert, who was wiping tears from his eyes. "Before I met Dr. Emily, I was just surviving, day to day, hour to hour, trying to make it through. But she taught me how to live. She taught me that even when the world is cruel and unfair, there are people who will stand beside you. There are people who will fight for you. There are people who will love you, not because you earned it, but simply because you are human." She kissed little Emily's forehead. "My daughter carries her name, and I promise, in front of all of you, that I will teach her to carry on, Doctor. Emily's legacy. I will teach her to be kind. I will teach her to be brave. I will teach her to see the invisible people and to be a light in the darkness." After the memorial, Robert found himself standing at Emily's grave once again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Sophia and little Emily were with him, along with dozens of others who had come to pay their respects. "Thank you," Robert whispered to the headstone. "Thank you for being my daughter. Thank you for being better than me. Thank you for leaving behind these beautiful people who are teaching me how to be human again." Little Emily toddled up to the grave and placed a flower, a pink rose, on the ground in front of it. "For Emily," she said, looking up at the adults with a smile. Pretty flower for Emily. Robert felt tears streaming down his face, but for the first time in a long time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude, of love, of hope. His daughter was gone, but she had left something precious behind, a legacy of kindness that would ripple out through countless lives, a child who carried her name, a father who had finally learned what really mattered. Years passed. Sophia graduated from nursing school with honors and took a job at the free clinic where Emily had worked. She became known for her compassion and dedication, just like the woman who had inspired her. Little Emily grew up in the big house on the hill, surrounded by love and laughter and family. She never knew the woman she was named after, but she knew her story by heart. She knew about the doctor who helped people when no one else would. She knew about the brave woman who stood up to bullies and fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And she knew about the grandfather who had almost lost his way, but found it again thanks to the love of his daughter. Robert lived to be 93 years old. He spent his final decades not in boardrooms and business meetings, but in schools and hospitals and community centers, quietly changing lives the way his daughter had taught him. When he died, peacefully in his sleep, the headlines didn't mention his business empire. They didn't talk about his net worth or his market capitalization. Instead, they celebrated the Emily Harrington Foundation, which had by then provided free health care to over 10 million people worldwide. They talked about the Robert Harrington Scholarship Fund, which had put thousands of disadvantaged students through college. They talked about the shelters and clinics and community programs that bore his name, all created in memory of the daughter who had taught him what truly mattered. At his funeral, Sophia, now in her late 40s, a respected nurse practitioner who had helped train hundreds of young healthcare workers, stood at the podium to give the eulogy. Little Emily, no longer little, now a young doctor herself working at the same free clinic where her namesake had once worked, sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Robert Harrington was a complicated man, Sophia began. When I first met him at his daughter's grave on a cold and rainy day, I thought he was just another rich businessman who didn't understand the struggles of ordinary people. She smiled through her tears. I was wrong. He was a man who had lost his way, but found it again. He was a man who learned even late in life that love is more important than success, that kindness is more valuable than wealth, that the impact we have on others is the only legacy that truly matters. She looked at young Emily in the front row. Robert used to say that his daughter, Emily, taught him how to be human. But I think it was more than that. I think she taught him how to love. And once he learned that lesson, he spent every day of his remaining life putting it into practice. She paused, looking out at the crowd of people who had come to pay their respects, former patients, scholarship recipients, employees, strangers whose lives had been touched by Robert's generosity. There is a saying that goes, "The measure of a life is not how long it lasts, but how much it matters." By that measure, Robert Harrington lived one of the fullest lives I've ever known. He turned his grief into purpose. He turned his guilt into action. He turned his loss into love. She smiled. And somewhere, I believe Emily is watching, and I believe she's proud, not just of her father, but of all of us who carry on her legacy. Every act of kindness we perform, every life we touch, every person we help, that's Emily's spirit, living on through us. She stepped back from the podium and took her seat. Young Emily reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." And Sophia smiled, remembering a rainy day at a cemetery when a broken billionaire had found a poor girl crying at his daughter's grave, remembering how that chance encounter had changed everything. Sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the darkest moments. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in pain, and sometimes, just sometimes, even the deepest grief can become the seed of a love that lasts forever.